Joining us now, Rob Sampson, the great state senator from the great town of Wolcott. Rob is one of those people standing up and fighting for the American system of government and its restoration here in the state of Connecticut, which could save the state and save taxpayers billions of dollars if only it would happen. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for the awesome intro.
Thought we should check in with you and find out what's going on in that dangerous building known as the state capitol.
Indeed. Yeah, well, it's crunch time at the state capitol. This is like the last week of most of the committees meeting to do their final passage of bills before they go to the House and Senate. And so like the next week and a half or so will be a little lull in between. But we're just wrapping up all of the bills out of committee. And one thing I want to report today, Todd, I usually come on and tell you bad news, but there's actually some good news today.
What?
And that is that Senate Bill 16, which anyone who's been following at the state capitol is a very important bill to gun owners in the state because that's the governor's gun control package. And boy, was it bad. Huge expansion of assault weapon bans and, restrictions on people, being able to open carry and lots of other things in that bill. And the great news is that through the hard work of a lot of citizens who came to the state capitol at a public hearing and spoke up, and myself and my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, we have the strongest two-way representation on the Judiciary Committee, I think, that we've had since I've been there. And I think the Democrats backed down today, and they said they don't want to, debate this bill in the committee with me there and Doug Dubitsky and Craig Fishbein and a bunch of others who were there prepared to really go toe-to-toe with them. So they actually gutted the bill. And so now most of those bad items have been taken out. And that is a huge victory for gun owners in the state. And I'm happy to report something positive for a change.
Can you tell us what the dynamic is for that being possible and why it can't apply to other equally urgent protections?
Well, I think it can. I mean, there's one thing that I keep preaching whenever I come on your radio program, Todd, is that, the power is in the hands of the citizens of Connecticut. We get the government we deserve, and we get the government that the people are asking for. And it's just sad that, people have kind of let their government, both the state and federal government, get away from them by not paying close attention and not holding them accountable. But we've witnessed just in the last couple of years, I think that's what the whole red wave is about. It's the fact that people are getting more involved. You got moms showing up at Board of Ed meetings. You got people standing on street corners with signs, stopping the toll issue a couple of years ago. We had a huge turnout at the Capitol a couple of times this year from gun owners to say we don't want any more gun control. So we can make a difference. And it's inspiring to me because this is the thing I've been working on, ever since I got into politics, is to get people to understand they can make change. And it's sad when I hear people say, nah, it doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. They're just going to do what they want. Well, they're going to continue doing what they want as long as we're quiet. But when we do speak up, we do get results.
They do what they want until they face some determined opposition. Doesn't have to be large numbers, but determined opposition often makes them run for the hills at the slightest hint of that opposition coming forward. It's incredible. Now, some things have their moments where the bad guys have been working a long time to be able to do their plundering and they get away with it. They see the opening and they run for it. But a lot of times there are things on the table that they will only vote for if they think there's not going to be too much light shined in the direction of those measures. And you're talking about one of those today where they saw that the lights were on and they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to be seen.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes, I'd say for the last couple of years, Todd, the Democrats have really had their foot on the gas pedal, passing everything in sight, moving their entire agenda without, really any fear of opposition. But I think that's changing. I think that a lot of the legislators, the Democratic legislators that are in the more swing districts are starting to get vocal with their leadership and saying, hey, you're putting me at risk. I don't really want to vote on this garbage just because some of the more progressive members do. And I think that's having a significant effect.
The fact that we're in an election season, you're saying, Rob, is creating a pressure that is being exerted by Democrats on Democrats and accentuating the split in the party.
Right. Well, that's a natural artifact that occurs when that party grows. You know, the more members that they get, the larger their majority is, the more area they're covering that they really shouldn't be. And they have legislators that are in districts that really shouldn't have elected those Democrats. And that becomes more and more obvious as that agenda gets more radical and election season starts to get hotter and people are paying closer attention. And I'm hopeful that, citizens in Connecticut will become much more aware of the things that have happened in recent years, and they will really hold the Democrats accountable because they have done tremendous damage to this state. Just listening to your show today, Todd, you covered everything that what we are up against in the world.
Really?
You covered the governor's lies. You know, unbelievable that he would put an ad out taking credit for fixing our economy.
Yes.
He's one of the biggest tax and spenders in the world. We would be facing like a $3 or $4 billion deficit if it wasn't for the gift of federal money.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. You talked about dependency. And there's one other thing I want to mention to you while I'm on today, and that is the other thing that we are up against in the legislature and in politics, generally speaking, is the progressive movement, which people need to understand is really a movement to undermine the notion of representative government, the idea that people actually hold their government accountable. You see this move towards separating the people from their elected officials. There is a bill going through the Government Administration and Elections Committee at the state capitol. It passed out of committee yesterday or the day before. Senate Bill 467. And what that will do is it will allow the remote meeting process, which is the Zoom meetings that a lot of people have become accustomed to over the last couple of years because of COVID. It will allow those to become permanent across the state. And what that means, Todd, is that some boards of education and some town councils will stop having in-person meetings. I cannot tell you just how bad an idea that is. That is a way for the Democrats to separate themselves from the people, and we have to stop it.
Wait, so there is a measure that would, well, back up a little bit. This is controlled by state law that people actually have to have in-person meetings, and they're proposing changing that law to allow them, even after COVID is long gone, to keep having remote meetings.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, it all started by executive order to allow them to initially have remote meetings, and then the legislature passed, several bills over the past couple of years, suggesting that because of COVID, we can keep extending this and extending this. And now they're trying to make it permanent. They're trying to seize the chance to make that a permanent way that we operate in the state, and it's terrible policy.
We're talking to State Senator Rob Sampson from Wolcott. What you're pointing to is the danger of precedents, new precedents being set, new ideas making their way into the public square. And the whole state of emergency thing allowed government to do a lot of things the government is never doing. And Democrats used to talk during the Trump era all the time about these traditional protocols of government, that if you violate these norms, that you risk making all kind of bad stuff real, and which, of course, they were acutely aware of the opportunity that represented for them to break norms and get people used to things that were outrageous, but people forget pretty quickly what's outrageous and what isn't when dealing with a state of emergency and all of the stuff that was going on during COVID. So you're talking about them wanting to make permanent something that they would never have been able to consider had it not been for those executive orders.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, and the fact is, there are some benefits to remote meetings. I think many more people than have traditionally been paying attention to legislative hearings and meetings at the Capitol probably are participating, and that's all great. But it's also simultaneously cutting out a large part of the population. There's plenty of people that don't have a computer. I mean, there's plenty of people that don't have internet access, and those people are simply just cut out of the whole situation. But even more important than that, anyone who's actually witnessed an angry mom yelling at her board of ed in person realizes the value of that situation, that you need to have elected officials that are easily accessible, and they have to suffer being in the same room with their constituents once in a while.
You could even argue that the notion of representative government requires that you have meetings in rooms with people walking into those rooms and able to confront directly in conversation those people who are making laws. And if you don't have that, if people don't have the opportunity to discuss person to person, there's a layer of indifference that is bound to develop between the cause and effect of people voting and having opinions and lawmakers making laws and deciding they don't need to represent the average person.
It's also about accepting that there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the government. I have to live with it. And that's what they're trying to create. That is progressivism in a nutshell. And I hope the listeners are just hearing this a little bit, because I think it's really something we have to watch for and notice it when it happens. You know, when you see the legislature, transfer power, or the electric bill, that's a great example. You know, we've talked about it many times. The legislature doesn't actually vote on electric rate increases anymore. They transfer that power over to a bureaucracy called PURA, who makes that determination. And the same kind of thing is happening all over the place. The legislature keeps passing more and more laws which take themselves out of the equation and transfer the power and decision-making over to some unelected bureaucracy who's going to decide. Look at the governor transferring the power over whether or not there's masks in school over to the commissioners of the various state agencies who are unelected people. This is happening before our eyes, and these big government bureaucracies are gaining more and more power to regulate. And it's not just that they're making these policies. They also operate completely contrary to our American system. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty. Well, these bureaucracies have the opposite attitude, that you have to keep proving yourself. You need to provide a document to show that you're actually eligible for that permit for whatever, to go fishing or
pay your fee.
Sell real estate.
You got to pay your fee. All right, Rob Sampson, State Senator, thank you, sir, for filling us in. Come back next week, okay?
Always my pleasure, Todd. Thanks so much.
All righty, we'll talk to you soon. How about that? Rob Sampson, Wolcott. Check him out, because he is a fighter for the American system. There aren't that many,